Yeah, so this is take two on starting over again with sharing. Hello, back. It's really strange to share when there's no one here sharing anything, and then I'm not talking to anybody. What's left is a vestige of a memory of starting a YouTube channel, and I'm not sure I know why I did it. I know why I stopped. Didn't seem appropriate to uh, share as I was going through an awful lot of movement, an awful lot of purging and processing, and just needed to take a break. I didn't have any juice for it. There's so much that I would say here. So before I get into updates and then move on to potential observations, I would like to say that some of this could potentially be interpreted as disheartening. There's not a hopeful message, um, and it's certainly not a place you would go to get relief or to feel good. Um, at best, it may end up being relatable content for people who are at least midway through the process. It took me quite um, a while to realize that how I say things isn't for everybody, um, which it felt like going against the grain, because if you look at what's being presented out there, it doesn't look like this. Um, um, in my travels around YouTube, there's all kinds of varieties of it, but it seemed that everybody seemed to know something, seemed to have some grasp on it, then and that made me feel really strange. And after a while, I started to watch that and go, that's weird because I don't feel like I really know anything. How are you able to quantify existence and put it into 3 easy steps of, I don't know, um, 3 steps to get rid of anger, or 3 steps to experience non dual states, or here are the 8 stages of awakening? And it dawned on me that whatever I would label as awakening here, which is not my favorite word still, had nothing to do with what um, is being presented out there. And it's no judgment to the folks that were out there, that are out there doing that. It just didn't ring true for me. It didn't feel like it had any tooth, like it had any grab here. So yeah, and part of that is and what's part of what's happened over the last few months is seeing that there's a real spirit of rebellion here. I think there always has been. Personality, don't necessarily know why there is that, but a fighting and a pushing back against any and all conventions. You know. So as I was wrapping up making my last few videos, I inadvertently, almost, I mean, without any conscious forethought, I found myself, I came across a teacher that I really liked. And I have had a couple sort of very brief informal reactions with teachers, and none of them for very long. And I didn't feel like I was looking for one. Found one, and it was funny to see that the being drawn to this particular person started like 2.5 years ago. Never seen any of their videos. It was someone else that I really liked watching who had referenced her in her videos, and something back here went bing, 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 and I went, okay, well, whatever, and went about my day-to-day life, and then it just sort of appeared, just showed up in my feed, and everything I saw, I went, I'd either experienced or went, that feels, that really lands here. I like the way this feels. So, yeah, so I started working with somebody. The strange thing is that, I felt the reason I wanted to do that, um, which was in such stark contrast to my rebellious nature, is there was some sense of wanting to maintain an accountability. And although the language might sound shitty here, there's some sense of it, like a submission, like, here, this is what's happening, because I know that it at least felt like for a while it had been a lot of, not only accelerating of what was happening and unraveling here, but also, mm, I'm running out of directions to move, options, tactics. And simultaneously shut down the page for a while. Um, so anyway, some of what I say, again, could even potentially be triggering, or not, but it doesn't seem like it's the run of the mill. Do this, and you will be enlightened. Um, in my experience, that's not how it works. So I'll get into the updates. What's really happened in the last 5 months has been unraveling. Has been the best way to describe it, and unraveling in terms of identification with things like the personality structure, unraveling in emotions, stored up in the body, places where I was really dug in, um, stuff that I didn't seem to either be able to or be aware of, being able to process in conscious thought. So my things like my dreams just lit up, and they were always very, very specific, and they had an emotional feel to them, and they would usually point to something that was still really being held on to here. Something, I don't know, like something fear based, or some sort of trauma when I was younger, or unresolved anger. And the feeling really was that I was just along for the ride, really just along for the ride. And I have, of course, moments of great clarity, and then moments of deep frustration, because at a certain point, we're left without any of what I would say would be our conventional defenses against uncomfortable emotions, or stuck parts of the personality, or past trauma that wants to come up. And that can be really, really terrifying, I think. And so there was this resignation here, just this, okay, what do you want to, what fuck do you want? um, what am I supposed to see? In times past, in the beginning of all of this, there seemed to be a mind or intellectual component that was necessary to process through this stuff, i.e., emotion comes up, and then the maybe tracing it back to a specific trauma, or something that had happened, or watching how the personality was shaped, or this happened to me. Um, and it was a very cognitive type of process. And after a while, that just gets tiring. For me, it got really, it was not even, I don't even know if it got tiring. It just seemed unnecessary. It was just feel through this, feel through this. And um, my teacher, uh, related it to an analogy that she had heard of. Imagine a train, and a train is going through a tunnel, and the tunnel could be processing or your awakening process or your shadow work, and the the locomotive, the engine in the front, breaks out of the tunnel into the light, right? But all the box cars are still in that dark, and they all have to be unpacked and looked at. And it is undetermined how long those box cars are for everybody. I have one of those marathon trains for sure. And I think my secret hope was to be able to circumvent or avoid unpacking those. But uh, for me, the process has been unrelenting and unyielding in giving me, um, well, a pass. Like, oh, let's let these 5 boxcars just they can just skate. It was looking at every single thing, and when I say a thing, I mean a place where an identity was held in, a stuck point, a place where a deep belief I was still really, really, really holding on to, or a wish I want it to work out this way. I want it to end up this way. And I don't know how it is for everyone else. I would say that there are probably more mild mannered personalities that maybe have less boxcars. Um, and I don't even know if I'm necessarily speaking to those folks. It's the people who've been really beat up by life. I think are my people. There is such a thing. Um, the deeply cynical people, the people who've given up all the way into just despair. Because I know those things and I relate to those things. So I was never able to put the model of awakening, or I'll just say clarity, into the very mild mannered structure that I saw that many folks got to experience. And I spent a fair amount of time sort of being pissed. Pardon me for a second. Some habits still remain. Out of resentment. I remember kind of almost sniveling in a way, or at least it felt like I was sniveling to my teacher and saying, how come they get it so easy? And she pointed out that not everyone shares everything that they've experienced, and they don't need to. But with so much content, that builds dimension internally. And when I first heard it, I sort of liked it, kind of in a way, because it gave some purpose or some meaning or some sort of value to what I was going through, although that was temporary. And the other side of it, I came back, recounting that conversation to a friend, and came back with like, I'm you know, I'm the Metatron's cube. Then I'm the what is it? I'm the tesseract, which is a 4D square, 4D cube of this shit, and going, this is just enough. And to see those two things coexist while I'm trying to be open and simultaneously resisting and simultaneously knowing there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide. I'm already so far into this, so far gone past what I would consider a conventional life and a conventional way to approach these things, that the very best I can do is to try to let go into this stuff. And that the thing is that um, sounds really good. But that also implies that there's somebody doing something to let go into this, when in absolute reality there isn't. So the process here is what I would call no stone left unturned. And I also had to walk away from things like sharing, and I walked away from communities. And even I had one conversation with my teacher, and I said, "This is if we're going to continue to do this, this has to be energetic in nature." And also, uh, he basically, I don't know if it was very fair or not, but I'm like, I'm out of words. You're going to have to sense into this because I don't know what to tell you. There was this massive resistance to trying to frame anything in a spiritual language. I think that's a hiding spot. I think that's a hiding spot for almost, if not everybody, through this process. And it was just as if all of me was just pushing back against it, going, I'm not going to do it. I don't like the language. If I never heard the word awakening or non duality or anything else like that, it would be just fine. It would actually be better because there's already so much stigma attached to these words and also projections. Um, and um, yeah, so I was having on one of my particularly rough sessions where I was just in a really bad spot. She asked me um, in a very gracious way, "What would it be like? How, or rather, how could I make this safe for you?" And I said, "Let's just dispense with all the spiritual language. I just need to speak in a fresh way, in a very no bullshit, stripped down, um, right to the center of it way, without all the trappings." Because I got caught up in the trappings for a long time. And I think we can hide behind spiritual language. I think we adopt it. I think there's safety in it. And the pushback here, which then extended to other areas of my life up into including friendships, relationships, was almost this demand for whatever was going to come up in the moment, that it would be uh, as stripped down as possible. I don't even like to use the word authentic or transparent, because these are things that it's just without all the chaff and without all the bullshit. And when I first talked to to Susanna, who my teacher's name, and said I needed one person I could speak this way to, because we spend most of our lives um, having to speak a very personal language with the people around us, our friends or who we work with, and all of that at that point was just absolutely incomprehensible to me. What are you talking about? I don't understand. And even more so when it got into spiritual communities. And I went, this is intolerable. At the time, I felt it was intolerable. So as this stuff began to unravel here, there's something going on that the conscious mind is not aware of, at least here. And most of the time, I think that we recount things like experiences or stuff that's happened or changes in either the psyche or whatever. We recount them in retrospect because as it's unfolding, it's just unfolding. The mind can't possibly grab onto it in that moment, even over time, and say, well, this is what is happening. Which again is part of the rebellion too. When I hear people talk about, well, I had this event happen or that event happen, or here's this stage or that stage. I went, At best, you're making this stuff up, or if you're a teacher, then you're putting it into such a language that will be palatable for somebody who still might identify. Okay, fine. It's great, necessary at a specific point, but I was thoroughly sick of it. So I had to spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time away from people, and spend as little time engaging with people as possible. And it was pointed out to me, which something I was very aware of too, is my bandwidth had narrowed, um, where I just didn't have anything for anybody and couldn't really be around people for too long. And just to be very clear, it is not as if they were being um, fucked up in any sort of way. I just, I couldn't, I just couldn't, can't be around it. You know, needed to go off and sort of lick my wounds or hang out by myself, and found that uh, solitude and isolation was absolutely amazing. It's nothing like it. And then at one point, I was having a conversation with my teacher, and she said, "So, what it appears to be is that you've already fallen through the self structure." And I went, "Huh?" There was a lot of things that were on my radar to look for in this process. Full non-dual states, mystical, all the fun stuff, mystical experiences. Um, uh, I don't know, any and everything that the mind can conjure up based on either past experiences that I had, or blissful experiences or whatever. I don't know that I ever really put much attention into self or no self in terms of reflecting on it. And when she said it, I went, huh. And then started asking myself, and in a conversation with a friend, I'm going, it just started about a week of just like examining. And I went, I must have missed it. And then really started going, what do I think the self is? Is it is it here? What is the self defined by? What is a self? What's it look like? How does it behave? How does it act? And it didn't take very long to see that I missed it. I wasn't there for it. And I don't mean in some really grand way of like, oh, you're just not there in the self. No, I just didn't seem to notice. But I also, in trying to dig into what is now a very foggy, jumbly memory, trying to look back and quantify it and go, well, when did this happen? And not being, and then came up with nothing. I couldn't, I couldn't find an event like that people talk about. All of a sudden it was clear and then there was no self. Well, I'd had other stuff happen, you know, pure consciousness, things like that. No self. That's weird. Um, and then the strangest thing was is that it was interesting to notice it, but also there wasn't a sense of satisfaction. Um, I mean, ultimately, I didn't just to report. I didn't find a sense of self, obviously, but it wasn't a sense of satisfaction of, oh, I've made it or I'm there. Because in that moment, there was still movement, and there was occasional thought, and there was still sensations of the body, and so-called external things like wind and air and hunger and food and sleep and preference. I like this, I don't like that. We couldn't find anything that it was attached to. So I wasn't able to go, ooh, I made it. I'm there. You just went, oh, that makes, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, no self. But not on an intellectual way. Just go, that's been here for a while. Anyway, and yet the unraveling process continues. And some things become infinitely clearer, which I will now say that I'm happy to report back on those, but they are filtered through the personality and through the experience. And that does not make it for everyone. And that does not mean that another person's experience is going to be that way. It's all seen through the lens of the personality here, the interpretation, the way the brain is structured. And the first thing is the personality, of course. This is the sense of separate self. I think one of the deepest roots and anchors of it is the belief that the personality itself is an entity. You take your specific way of being programmed with everything that's ever happened to you, everything you've ever experienced, anything that's been stored into memory in the conscious realm, everything that's been stored energetically into the body, and you go, that's me. So when you find something you like, I like blue cheese, I don't like ranch or whatever. That's because that was trained. So your personality was trained into you, not by anybody specific. There's tendencies. And over a period of time, and that's not the exclusive source of all of that, but that it has a huge effect. And so when the personality becomes challenged, that's where resistance comes in. And that personality tends to form conclusions based on its specific set of conditions. If I've experienced, I don't know, um, a lack of safety and a sense of abandonment, then in my journey, once I actually move into an awakening, actively into an awakening process, then these are the things that I'm going to expect out of this. And you don't say that to yourself, of course, but it comes out that way. Okay, so I need to feel safe because I never felt safe. I needed a sense of validation, or I needed financial security, or I needed whatever it is. Everyone's got their own. And it's like you're trying to bring the opposite into balance based on the personality structure. And at some point, you start to see that that is not how it's going to work. And that is actually not even the structure in which all of this happens, because it's still based around the personality. It's based around the active mind combined with the causes and patterns and habits and trauma and conditioning going, it's time for relief. It's time to um, change this up. And it's all based around what that fictional structure is going to get out of this. And the bad news and the triggering point is that's not how it works, at least not here. I could say something relatively definitively is it dawned on me, I don't get to take me, Ted, with me to the end of this or to a certain point. Obviously, there's no end. And I uncovered a very deep belief that I wanted to bring Ted into this. I wanted all of his personality, all of his quirks intact as an identity, as a separate identity, to move into an awakening state, to stay in that state, and then to reap whatever the benefits were, whether it was greater safety, greater security, financial security, doing a job I really love, or whatever, the billion and one things we have on the wish list. And I had clued into that a couple of years before that and started feeling like I was grieving the loss of this Ted. And there was some like despair type sadness and bitterness and frustration of kind of like talking to the universe or talking to God and going, why couldn't you save him? He didn't break himself. He didn't ask for any of this. Blah, 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 whiny snivel, blah, 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 which is what I was doing. And then after the resistance came, then there was just this sadness of like, I have to let this go. And I knew, and it just felt so counterintuitive because what had I been doing this entire time? I'm trying to save Ted, trying to save me so that I can go and live a better life, one that's free of trauma, and free of douchebags, and free of physical pain, and free of financial insecurity, and free of all of it, all of it. It's not how it works. What's worse and what became even more challenging is after a while losing any point of reference for what was happening. And then the frustration that came with that, watching everyone else. I don't mean that in a non-dual way, but more like all the people that I see, which is only a snippet of the people, a tiny percentage of the people that are going through this, all kind of seemed to be getting what they wanted, and they were covered in bliss, and they were like, I followed the steps, or I did the 10 fetters, or I can definitively tell you that these are the stages of enlightenment, or I worked with this teacher and I stayed inside this community and I woke up at a retreat, or I had this amazing thing, and I'm like, how come they all get this thing? You know, because everything seemed to be the exact opposite for me as to what was being laid out. And that caused a tremendous amount of doubt. I'm getting it wrong. I'm completely off the beaten path here. That one, I will say that's much closer to the truth. I'm in complete uncharted territory. None of these things that I see or hear or talk about are helpful. I don't want to go to a retreat. I don't want to be around a whole bunch of other people. Matter of fact, right now, at least at that point in time I'm referring to, I can't stand it. I don't want to be around anybody. I need to be off by myself. Communities and retreats, obviously, I have to officially say, I think are a great structure for a lot of people. And I think they're needed. And I think that they are amazingly beneficial. So I'm not attacking those specifically. You know, it's just I couldn't plug myself into that. I couldn't plug this process. And I knew it at about 2 or 3 years ago when I ran into I don't have a lucid question to ask somebody, which is why I didn't um, take on working with anybody in terms of like having like a teacher or a guide in the now numerous sessions I've had with Susanna. I said it the last time. I've asked one question. I don't even ask questions. What is that? Because after a while, it becomes to the point where you see so many of the questions that people ask is we're looking for a solution, and um, it's not that practices or anything like that or step-by-step things aren't beneficial, but eventually I think they all have to be abandoned. But we're looking for a solution, looking for relief, looking for, on the deepest level, I think it's permission. Quite literally, when if I see a video and I see a Q&A situation, it's one aspect of God asking the other aspect of God in the most beautiful, innocent way, regardless of what the specifics of the question are, who's asking it or who's answering it, going, it's the weirdest thing. Is it okay for me to let go a little bit more? Or some derivative of that? How do I let go a little bit more? How do I move a little bit more into the unknown? So it's not even about the specifics of the question. The specifics themselves are based in that personality structure. So we spend a lot of this time, whether we're aware of it or not, unpacking the things in the personality, i.e., the traumas, preferences, likes, dislikes, circumstances, unpacking these things so that they can be felt through if needed and then released. But it's not even us that's doing the releasing. There's no mechanism for letting go. That's a disheartening statement, right? There's no quantifiable, one size fits all. This is how you let go. You see people telling you how to let go. This is the one time I'm going to be this blunt in this uh, video. They're full of shit. Probably deluding themselves. Almost certainly attempting to delude you, although not deliberately. The closest thing to letting go, and I have to be careful with this because this still implies that there's an autonomous person that can do something by themselves, is where attention is moved. Moving it right back into something that is not the thought space, whether it's an object, whether it's body sensations, whether it's attention sort of folding in on itself. Attention can't do that, but whether it's awareness noticing itself, that's the closest that I ever discovered to supposed letting go. And rather than being a very linear, do this and then something lets go, what that did was just seem to arrest that particular moment's movement down the thought train and into further identification. That's it. So going back to earlier what I said, this can appear potentially can appear sort of hopeless. And I think I deeply understand why people will get to a certain point and come across this huge wall of things that are energetic in nature that can't be explained, that can't be tracked back to a certain trauma, that can't be, and something shows up and they stop at a certain point. Totally understandable. It dawned on me at some point, not that this was something that I was doing, that just didn't want to stop. There was no desire to really truly stop. There was no desire to set up a conclusion, to set up a structure, because I had done that over and over and over again. Had this awakening experience, therefore it must be this. Let's go plug it into the chart. That's step 4. Okay, this level of awakening. Cool. All right, let's go over to the people chart, to the humanity chart. Okay, I've unpacked this trauma, you know, because this happened to me when I was a kid. Okay, check the box, check the box. And it puts it into a quantifiable type of thing. But also, after doing that, having that entire process exhaust itself over time, endless repetition, it became very clear that conclusions are death to the process. Assumptions are static, they're frozen. Setting up locations or boundaries or any type of way of being, any, any type of way of being halts the process. It goes completely contrary to the natural flow of this, of whatever this is. And it can be evidenced in every single moment that because everything that is nothing is in constant change and in constant flux, how can we possibly set up a mental structure or a conclusion or a specific level of awakening or a state that was static and defined and have that be it? It just becomes a dead state. It becomes a statement. And it's not that it can't be beneficial at some point while we're still hanging on with like one little finger into the solidity of reality. It's it's like a life preserver for the personality. It's like a buoy. It's like if you're a little kid and you have your arm floaties on, and then you will only go out into the deep end with your little arm floaties. At some point, those things have to come off. And all of our conclusions and all of the things that provided that personality a sense of safety and a sense of I've arrived, or thank God I don't have to go through that anymore, or there's no person here, therefore I don't have to suffer. That's a big one. Everyone hiding behind that. There's nobody here, so there's no one to suffer. I could go on about that for forever. Many other people have. We'll keep moving. It's like you hang on to that, but it's like this is already the second time of us doing this. First, we did it in what we'll call the relative world and building our personality structure and building who we are, and that didn't seem to work out too well, and it got really sort of fucked up. Or else we wouldn't even go over to this spiritual journey type of thing for the most part. We wouldn't even go, well, this is fail. If success in relative practical life works out, I would say it's pretty rare that people go, I need to you know, it needs to not work. The structure and the conclusions need to not work to such a degree that we start looking outside of that. But then we get there and we're like, this is new and this is fresh. Ooh. And it's kind of woo woo and it doesn't sound like anything else. It doesn't sound like modern success and money and, accomplishment and achievement and all of that. Let's go over into this one. And then right away, immediately, not only do we start setting up camp in all these other areas, but then we adopt a language that's unchallengeable. And we adopt the intellectual things. Oh, of course, there's no self. At a certain point in time, it becomes energetically where you can sense. I'm like, you just said there's no self, and your chest kind of puffed up about it. Not literally, of course, but you can sense it. You can see it. Like you're still dug in. You got your finger on that. How about we take your whole spiritual community, everything you've ever learned, and render it and completely incapacitate it, render it null, void, useless, worthless. You don't even get to say the word meditate, right? You don't get to say bliss or awakening or anything. Now what? What are you going to do? I realize how I'm saying this is a little challenging. I understand that the personality structure here isn't for everybody. Um, when I So, okay, to wrap up on that, but eventually we got to let go of that one too, right? All of it, all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. And it's not that we let go of it, it's ripped away from us. It was for me. And I wasn't ready. I'm still hanging on to barely like one pinky on the life preserver and I'm off in the deep end and something comes along, sink or swim, figure it out. And I didn't figure it out. I didn't come to any conclusions that I will say are absolute. Anything that I'm saying here are just sort of observations of just kind of, they're loose at best. Couldn't tell you how to get from here to there. Could only say it appeared there was such a rebellious streak here that my only other option was quite angrily to throw away the structure, because I sensed that they were all dead conclusions of like, forget this, fuck your spiritual language. I can't hide behind those anymore because none of them are working. I had a conversation with my teacher at one point and said, the one question I asked, we were talking about it, and somehow or another, it was the basic thing, and I can barely remember, but it was, what's it like for you? She'll lay out things like head, heart, gut awakening. And I go, those are so static. It can't possibly be like that. There's no way you can quantify, like, what's your moment to moment? And I'm like, because here, there's nothing that's quantifiable at all. She goes, oh, well, yeah. And we laughed about it. And I'm like, so how do you teach? Well, I press a tape recorder and this stuff comes out, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we kind of had a laugh about it. And I was like, ah, yes, so you're communicating in such a way that you just move into deliberately, I suppose, into dualistic language, and then stuff happens. And then a few days later, I was writing, and I went, I wonder what happened if I were to ever get back into sharing. And I pressed that tape recorder in the midst of this completely indescribable mystery. What would come out? The sword or the pillow? And to explain that, since it made perfect sense to me at the time, the sword, off with your head. Just off with your head. The sword is very fierce. The sword is um, dispels and crushes all of your beliefs and finds all of your hiding spots. And if it's wielded accurately, you can take it off in one blow. Or the pillow, which is rest, saying something like, it's okay. Life has you. You are life. This whole thing is custom tailored for you. And both could be effective. And I knew that I was kind of winding up, and I felt like, I don't know. There's not a conscious way, a cognitive way at all that seems to have developed here to be able to tell whether or not to use sword or pillow. I went, oh, you know what? Smartest thing to do, shut up, sit here and see how it unfolds. Yeah, rest or off with your head. I'm speaking to no one. There isn't anybody here. The mind, the body, the apparent you moving through the world is all contained in this, and none of it has any inherent structure to it. It dawned on me at one point driving to the store. I went, oh, the whole game, it's the whole thing is just a play, and that felt very strange. I couldn't put a label on it, but the fiction of the story, the tale of bees, the tale of Ted, seemed to be very, oh. And there are things that are hard to hear, I think, for people at some point of this, if you want to call it space or awareness or presence or whatever, doesn't have any skin in the game, doesn't have a dog in the race. I first heard that many years ago and went, wow, that's pretty heartless. That's pretty cold. That's from the mind's perspective. That's from the supposed fixed personality's perspective of why can't you save me? Why won't you save this? When in fact, awareness's ability to be anything that it wants, up to and including taking the shape and form of diluted, separate personality. It's testament that it is what it is. It's God. It's just literally God. And the individual personality can shake its fist and go, fucking why? But at the very end, when it's all said and done, nothing is ever harmed. If you look deep enough, when the mind gets tired of satisfying itself with intellectual answers and solutions in the realm of awakening, in the structure of fetters and stages and practices and all of that, the mind finally gives up. The eternal nature of everything is seen. It is seen that there could never not be existence. You can never not be here. This can never not be this. For some, with a lot of boxcars, I think reconciliation of the personality seems to need to happen. I had to get through all the shame. I had to get through the hatred and loathing of not only what was done to me, but the shape of Ted that came out of all of these events. I had to get past the not good enough. I had to get past all of that. And it's a weird paradox of reconciling a personality while simultaneously disowning it, releasing a claim on it, just going, this is just how this is programmed. And I began to ask myself, what is here that isn't programmed? What is here that doesn't have a pattern or a habit? What is here that doesn't label? What is here that doesn't see a couch, a phone, whatever? And exploration can't be done in the intellectual, in the experiential. So I'm no more awake than anyone else. Enlightenment is a word. There's sight, sound, taste, smell, all the senses. It doesn't, I have to form some kind of pseudo conclusion. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine about this the other day. And I think I'll wrap up with this. There appear to be elements of, shall we say, they're the phantoms or the echoes or the ripples of the individual personality thinking it's a self. And after you've fallen through the self structure, these things continue. And to bring it into something less abstract sounding. Uh, there were times where it felt like, yeah, I would be get reactive over things or get angry over things, or have resistance or whatever, and go, that's weird. Where did that come from? And also just kind of a detachment to it, but not even an observer state. Just I felt powerless to do anything about it, while also seeing the complete and total fiction of it, wondering where that came from. And that happened enough times where I went, oh, okay. Um, there's these, maybe these pockets of things where the energy, it's like another one of the cars on the train. This is just going to have to play itself out. It's just going to have to fizzle out. It doesn't mean there's a self. Personality, experience, and existence in a subtle way imply that there's a self. It's like, no wonder we all get hypnotized by it. But it doesn't mean absolutely that there is a self. It just means that there are patterns and habits. And with the lack of defensiveness or the ability to defend, I mistakenly assumed that there was either some sort of solid entity, or I was getting it wrong, or had regressed, or all the old classic things that we hear about. Because the slightest little twitch just brought up the most insane level of intensity of emotion, the most unfiltered, raw, unguarded, primal, whether emotion, anger, sadness, fear, jealousy, joy, bliss, all of it. And it really took me by surprise. I didn't know we could feel this intensely. And then the subtle messages of the poor mind who's just trying to keep up, going, yeah, failed again. Definitely not awake. Definitely can't tick off the last 2 or 3 boxes of this journey. You're stuck. So my teacher said, I think you should share. She goes, I'm not trying to set you up as a teacher. And I said, good, because something wants to move here. So this has been purely just expressing. And it's possible that I will continue to share. I really don't know. It's on an if and when basis, as needed basis. Can't be concerned about algorithms and all of that foolishness. This is supposed to land with somebody, it does. It doesn't. It's my medicine. So, just creeping on an hour. Um, Maybe I'll break this up into 2 parts. So if you made it this far, be blessed. As far as I'm able to invoke a sense of separation, or it's just something that feels nice to me, may you be blessed. Be deeply, deeply, deeply blessed.